I knew it wasn't Sunday dinner the moment I saw the crystal flutes lined up like soldiers and my mother's holiday china gleaming under the chandelier. Marissa sat at the head of the table as if the seat had always belonged to her, smiling with the breezy entitlement of someone announcing a new brand of cereal. "So next week I'll be moving into your place," she said, casual as weather, "just until I figure things out." My father popped champagne as if we were toasting a promotion, not a takeover. The boxes labeled with her name in my garage, Marissa's winter clothes, Marissa's books snapped into focus. The Pinterest board I'd found that morning, Marissa's new room, made more sense than I wanted it to. My mother had called it perfect timing. It felt like a raid pre-approved by the family council. I tightened my grip on my water glass until my knuckles blanched, then set it down and reached for the envelope I'd nearly left in the car. If I waited for a right moment with my family, I would die waiting. "Actually," I said, sliding the manila envelope onto the table, "I have news too." Their choreography faltered. My mother's smile thinned. My father lowered his glass. I pulled out the papers and saw the realization dawn before I spoke the words. "This is the sale agreement for my house," I said. "I sold it last week. I have 30 days left." The silence struck like a dropped plate, and then an actual plate shattered. Marissa's champagne glass slipped and exploded on the hardwood in glittering fragments no one moved to gather. My father swelled with parental certainty. "You can just cancel the sale," he declared. "These things have cooling-off periods." My mother rose in tandem with him, a practiced flank. "We promised Marissa she could stay as long as she needed," she said. "You can't expect her to find a place in 30 days? Aunt Sarah cleared her throat from the end of the table, too pleased with her own usefulness to notice my face. "We were going to move her things next Tuesday while you were at work. Just to make it easier for everyone." That word, everyone, landed like a thumb on a bruise. I took out my phone and held up the Pinterest board, the careful palette of mauves and creams, the caption crowning my house with someone else's name. "Interesting timing," I said. "While you were planning a move-in, you were also designing her room." My father pivoted to leverage. "What about your property taxes coming due? You know, I always help with those." My mother's voice softened into the tone she reserved for the allegedly fragile. "This kind of impulsive decision-making isn't like you. Are you feeling all right if not compliant? Then unwell." It was an old family script, and for years I'd let it cast me as the problem. I could have offered the ledger that had driven me to this table, the March storms revealing a roof that failed 8 years early, the invoice for $11,200 that erased vacations and my small cushion, the April water line rupture that swallowed $8,200 plus the insult of torn-up landscaping, the June heating system collapse that cost $5,000 and scoured the last of my emergency fund. I could have described the spreadsheets that never balanced the midnight tears. No one saw the belt I punched new holes into, rather than buy smaller pants while telling myself it was temporary. But explanations in my family were tinder evidence to be repurposed against me the next time I set a boundary. So I said, "Only, I made this decision for my own reasons. It's final." "You did this to spite me?" Marissa declared, tears lifting her voice, even as she stood on the only safety net our parents had ever held. The accusation was familiar. My self-preservation rebranded as cruelty, my no recast as sabotage. I gathered the papers back into the envelope and felt for the first time in months the tremor in my hands still. By 7:30 a.m. Tuesday, the campaign had begun. Aunt Sarah called, while my coffee was still dripping, ladling concern over an accusation. "Is it true you sold your house just to keep Marissa from staying with you?" My father's golf buddy left a voicemail I deleted halfway through the moral of his story clear long before he reached it. Facebook delivered a public benediction from my mother beneath Marissa's post about learning who truly has your back. At 8:40 a.m., my colleague Lisa appeared at my desk, whispering about a church program for temporary housing, the pity in her eyes so much worse than the censure. That evening, I locked myself in a bathroom stall and texted Marissa. "Stop telling people I'm making you homeless. It's a lie, and you know it." Her answer arrived immediately, a weaponized inevitability. "You're selling the house I was counting on. What would you call it?" When the calls ebbed and the house went quiet, I spread my records across the dining table. The invoices, bank statements, tax assessments, and the grim tally of savings drained by a roof, a water line, a heating system, and the kind of parental help that came with strings and lectures. I placed a photo on top me on my front porch 9 years ago, keys clenched in a fist I'd raised toward the sky, the exact moment I realized I'd bought a home without anyone's signature but mine. I traced the picture frame and felt something unclench. I was not an obstacle in someone else's story. I was the person who had built this life and could change it. The sales agreement included a rent-back clause, 30 days to live here after closing, while I closed on a modest townhouse, and I held that small square of breathing room like a talisman. Tomorrow, I'd call a family meeting with witnesses who could cut through mythology. Tonight, I packed another box and labeled it with a blue marker in careful block letters, "Keep." At exactly 7 p.m. Tuesday, my doorbell chimed like a summons. When I opened it, the sight struck me like a tableau. My parents, Marissa, Aunt Sarah, Uncle Robert, and Cousin Jennifer, all standing in formation. A family firing squad. Behind them, Dorothy slipped in quietly, her gaze steady her presence, the only reason I didn't shut the door. I led them to the dining room where my documents waited in a neat row across the table. For once, I didn't tremble as I picked up the first paper. Before anyone says a word, I told them, "You need to see this." I laid down the roof replacement invoice, $11,200. Insurance covered nothing. The shingles lasted 22 years instead of 30. Then the water line bill, $8,200. The city forced me to replace it when they updated the main line. No payment plan, no warning. Finally, the heating system invoice, $5,000. I had no choice. The system failed in June. I stacked the papers side by side, forming a grim triptych of survival. My emergency fund is gone. My financial advisor said selling while the market is strong is my best option. The room shifted. Uncle William leaned forward, glasses sliding down his nose. My mother stared at the invoices as though the numbers might rearrange themselves into a different outcome. Marissa scraped her chair back and stood, her voice rising. "This is creative accounting, Eden. You've always been good with numbers when it suits you. You're just trying to dodge your responsibilities to family." But then Uncle William turned toward her. "Marissa, what's your current employment situation? Last I heard you were between jobs." The question landed like a stone in still water. Marissa floundered. "I'm exploring opportunities. The job market is tough right now." My mother jumped in defensive. "William, this isn't about employment. Family duty exists regardless of finances. Eden has always had that big house with all that space." Aunt Sarah pursed her lips, peering over her reading glasses at the heating bill. "What about you and Roger Helen?" she asked my mother. "You have that guest room. Why can't Marissa stay with you?" The air shifted again, currents pulling in directions I had never seen before. Dorothy cleared her throat gently. "I've known this family for 20 years. I've seen Eden manage every expense on her own, while Marissa has had help with rent, car payments, credit cards. The pattern is clear to everyone but you." Barbara, my advisor, spoke next, her voice crisp. "Enabling financial dependency hurts both sides. The giver depletes their resources. The receiver never learned survival skills. Eden is acting responsibly." Even Thomas, who had sat silent in the corner, leaned forward. "My brother lived at home until 42. My parents paid for everything. When they died, he couldn't cope. Lost their house within a year. Sometimes the kindest thing is to stop rescuing someone. The silence that followed was unlike any I'd known at these gatherings. Not hostile, not scolding, just heavy with recognition. Uncle William's voice carried the weight of the moment. "Eden, why didn't you say something sooner?" I hesitated, caught between the armor of privacy and the possibility of support. My father stared at the floor, uncharacteristically quiet. My mother's clenched posture loosened her hands resting open on the table. For the first time, they looked less like judges and more like people uncertain of their own roles. Then Marissa broke the spell, grabbing her purse and storming to the door. "You're all acting like I'm a parasite. Eden's always been the golden child with her perfect job while I struggle, and nobody cares." When the door slammed behind her, the echo lingered, but no one rushed to follow. Uncle William sighed. "It's time we had a family financial planning session. For everyone." His eyes flicked toward my parents, then back to me. Later, as I taped another box shut, the house felt different. Hollow, yes, but also lighter. The conversation had cracked the foundation of decades of enabling. For once, I wasn't the villain in the family script. I set aside the photo of me clutching my house keys 9 years ago, recognizing the symmetry. That woman had been brave enough to claim independence. This woman was brave enough to defend it. By the following weekend, the knocks came again. This time, my parents arrived with Marissa in tow, a united front dressed in strained smiles. "We've been talking," my mother began, "and we've found the perfect solution." My father chimed in. "A compromise." They sat on my couch while I remained standing. "Instead of Marissa moving in with you, what if you helped her get her own place alone just until she's steady? With your success, it wouldn't hurt you." Marissa added her practiced tone. "Some people just have bad luck. You've always had things work out. I just need a little help." The implication clung to the air. "You're successful, she's struggling, you owe her." My mother leaned forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "If you can't help your sister just this once, you'll regret it. Family sticks together." I walked to the dining table where another set of documents waited. "I'm meeting with my lender tomorrow," I said, handing my father a pre-approval letter. "The townhouse payment is nearly 40% less than my mortgage here. Selling this house is about my financial health, not Marissa's needs." My mother opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "I can't support Marissa financially, but I can help her support herself." I pulled a business card from my pocket. "Our marketing department has an entry-level opening. Starting salary covers rent on a 1-bedroom. HR is ready to interview you." For once, Marissa looked caught off guard, words stalling in her throat. My father rose, bristling. "Marissa needs no," I said, placing another folder on the table. Inside, an itemized spreadsheet chronicled every financial bailout she'd received in the past 5 years. The totals circled in red made my mother gasp. "I've never asked you for money," I said. "Not for college, not for this house, not for repairs. But you've supported Marissa constantly. That's not love. That's dependence." My father's protest faltered. My mother whispered, "We just wanted to help her." "The best help is teaching her to stand on her own," I replied. For once, they had no retort. They gathered their things quietly, my father guiding my mother toward the door. Marissa lingered. "I don't need your charity job," she said, voice brittle. I placed the card on the entryway table. "It's not charity, it's opportunity." As she turned to leave, I saw her slip the card into her purse. The door closed. Silence stretched across the half-empty living room. It didn't feel hollow this time. It felt open. A future unclaimed, but mine to define. The townhouse felt foreign at first, its white walls bare, its echoes sharp against the hardwood floors. I moved in with only what I truly needed: boxes, carefully labeled, furniture scaled down, and the photo of me on the porch of my first house 9 years earlier. That picture, now framed on my kitchen counter, reminded me that independence was not just something I achieved once, but something I could choose again and again. 3 months later, the strangeness began to soften. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows each morning, warming the floor beneath my bare feet. I brewed coffee without dread gnawing at my stomach, paid bills without panic rising in my chest, and even allowed myself to dream again. My financial advisor, Barbara, had been right. Downsizing reduced my housing costs by nearly 40%, enough to rebuild my emergency fund and breathe freely for the first time in years. On the kitchen island sat a new purchase I once would have considered indulgent, a professional-grade camera. My first photography class began on Wednesday evening, and the thought of learning something purely for joy felt revolutionary. For nearly a decade, every penny and every decision had gone into survival: roof repairs, tax bills, loan payments, obligations no one ever acknowledged. Now, with a structured budget and weekly check-ins with Barbara, I carved out space for growth rather than mere endurance. The Sunday dinner invitation from my parents arrived by text. I hesitated before accepting, fingers hovering over the screen. The old anxiety prickled at the back of my neck. Would the ambush begin again? Would the guilt resurface? Still, something inside me urged a trial, not out of duty, but out of curiosity. I walked into their house carrying a bottle of wine, not the weight of expectation. My father greeted me with a genuine hug instead of a performative smile. "Eden, come see what your sister brought," he said, pride in his voice that startled me. In the dining room, Marissa stood arranging flowers in a vase. She looked up, her smile hesitant but real. "They gave me my first business cards today," she said, holding one out. "Assistant marketing coordinator. It sounds fancy, but I mostly run errands and update spreadsheets. Still, I'm learning so much." She handed me the card without bitterness, without the edge of comparison. For the first time in years, her voice carried pride rather than resentment. My mother carried in a casserole and placed it at the center of the table, not closer to Marissa, not angled as an offering. "Tell us about the campaign you mentioned last week," she said to my sister, then turned to me. "And Eden, how was your photography class?" Her gaze held steady, divided equally between us. Dinner felt almost ordinary. My father asked thoughtful questions, listening instead of preaching. Marissa described her first assignment in detail, her cheeks flushing with excitement. I found myself laughing more than bracing, tasting food instead of swallowing it past tension. Something fragile had shifted in the air, as if the family house of cards had finally collapsed, and in the ruins, we could build something steadier. A week later, my own loft filled with laughter as Dorothy raised a glass. Around my modest coffee table sat Thomas, Barbara, Uncle William, and even Marissa. To homes that shelter us and boundaries that protect us, Dorothy toasted. She handed me a gift wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a frame holding 2 photos, one of me on the porch with my first house keys, and another of me holding the keys to the townhouse. "2 brave beginnings," she said softly. My throat tightened. "2 very different women," I replied. Marissa surprised me most. She stayed after the others left, notebooks and calculator apps spread across my kitchen table. "If I put away 15% of each paycheck," she murmured, chewing her lip, "I could have first and last month's rent by January." Our parents sat on the sofa, watching pride and regret etched across their faces. My mother admitted quietly, "We thought we were helping, but we were hurting both of you in different ways." My father nodded, his eyes shadowed with the weight of unlearning. As I guided Marissa through her budget, I glimpsed the sister I'd once hoped to have, determined, curious, not shielded by excuses. It struck me how fragile the line between help and harm truly is. When does support become enabling, When does sacrifice become erasure? That night, as I closed my own budgeting app and placed the framed photos side by side on my shelf, I realized the answer wasn't simple. Sometimes, the most radical act of love is refusing to carry someone else at the expense of yourself. Sometimes, it's giving them the space and even the struggle they need to grow. So much had been taken from me in those 9 years, savings drained, trust, tested dreams deferred. But what I gained was something rarer, the conviction that boundaries are not barriers but bridges to healthier lives. As I locked the door to my loft and turned off the lights, I whispered the words that had carried me this far. I made this decision for my own reasons, and it was final. If this story moved, you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And let me know in the comments, have you ever had to set a boundary that changed everything?